Yay!
Hey, as if by magic.
Yes, worked.
Brilliant. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much,
that's all
Michael.
right. Yeah.
Mhm. And we were just saying that we're wearing the Ukrainian colours,
I know, yeah. So
so
if we do
channeling that.
that,
Boob to boob.
we did not
um,
coordinate. Yeah.
no, it was complete by accident, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very good. Anyway, so we'll just get going because it's lovely. We've got a few people joined us. That's really nice. Hello.
Hi.
Um, so yeah, I'm just gonna start with, so who are you and
Oh,
why
hi,
did
Adam.
you start playing music and where has music taken you so far?
Oh my gosh. Well, where do I begin? How did I started because I grew up in the church, and the all sort of like all the church kids that they all learn some sort of instruments. Quite a lot of so the parents would be like, "Oh, you should learn the piano." So my mum sort of started me on the piano when I was 6 or something, but I kind of hated it, and like I just didn't really enjoy it. But I had to learn it, so I sort of like kept on with my piano lessons for like 6 years or something. And then when I went into the secondary school, I for some reason I just really wanted to learn the flute, so I joined the wind band. And then they showed me this like huge poster of like all the wind and brass instruments. They were like, "Oh, just point at the instruments that you want to learn." So I was like that, and that was like the flute, and I have no idea why. And so they were just like, "Okay, well, you want to learn flute, and here's the flute," and I started learning it. And yeah, apparently, like my uncle told me like many years later, he was like, "Oh, you probably don't remember, but when you're 1 year old or something, like we showed you like some recordings. So we played like a trumpet recording, a flute recording, a piano recording, and a violin recording, and they wanted me to pick one, and I actually picked the flute. I had no
There you go.
idea. Yeah, so maybe it's just like meant to be or something.
Yeah, it's definitely meant to be. I
Yeah,
mean, you're still playing it, so.
yeah, I know. Uh, Miracle. Yeah, so I applied to the academy, didn't think I was going to get in, and I got in, and yeah, the rest is history. I'm just
Oh,
now like freelance, in the country with different orchestras and ensembles, and yeah, I just did I just had a really busy week. Like I was doing the Rite of Spring with Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, like on Monday and Tuesday. It was really fun, like very intense, but like really fun. And and yesterday I did Star Wars with them as well, which is also really fun.
good mix, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a good thing about being freelance musician is that you're never, if you're lucky enough to have work coming in, it's never boring, is it?
No, yeah, because you kind of never know what you're going to do, really, and that's really fun. And I feel like I've been extremely lucky. So thank you.
It's great to be, like working, doing what we love, isn't it? So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so just quickly, I just want to say that so my name is Mana, but I think some people might know that already. I'm a Japanese female in her 30s. I'm 35 now. And I've got short black hair, and today I'm wearing like a sky blue cardigan, just for info. And Michael, if you don't mind saying something about what people can see.
Right, so I'm a Taiwanese British flautist. My name is Michael, and I am like 171 centimeters, so like tall. Like yeah, I'm 5'6", I suppose. I'm wearing yeah, I also have like really short black hair, even shorter than Mana. Um, uh, and I'm wearing a yellow jumper kind of thing. Like yeah, so that's why we coordinated as the Ukrainian color
Yeah, looking
flag
very
color.
well.
Yeah.
Um, Great, thank you. So next question. How did you find the lockdowns? Where were you, and how has the pandemic kind of affected you? Because I actually quite liked lockdowns because I'm a hermit, and luckily, no one close to me has um was like severely affected by COVID. Apart from myself, who's now got long COVID, but
Oh
that's
no,
by the
yeah.
But I quite like being at home and actually spending time with Adam, my husband, and just chilling and doing things that you want to do, read books you want to do.
Hmm.
But then this project that I'm doing for my Yard Ensemble came about from all the reading and thinking I did during that time. So how was yours? How are you?
Oh my gosh. Well, the all the lockdowns and it was hard, but I mean in a way that like yeah, because I okay, um, so I was kind of like stuck in the basement flat in Shepherd's Bush, like when the lockdown began, and like yeah, it was hard because like literally my diary was wiped like overnight, and then I lost like over half of my income, and I was just like, what am I gonna do? you know, and I'm sure like every one of us like all the freelance musicians have exactly the same thought, and like um, luckily I have some teaching and have some saving, and so that's just kind of kept me going. And I suppose you're not going anywhere, so all you have, if you can afford your rent and like living expenses and all that, then like so I survived. It was fine. It was hard. Um, like we did loads of I suppose we did loads of like things online, didn't we? Like play games and like all the remote recording stuff. I like we had to do. It was really fun in a way, and almost like I feel like it's kind of like a blessing in disguise, I suppose, because like we were so busy like leading up to that point, and all of a sudden it's just like pause, like everything stopped, and like nobody was allowed to go out, and then nobody was allowed to do anything, and so I was like, actually that's quite nice because like I don't think we would, fingers crossed, like never get that opportunity again ever. um so yeah, apart from like obviously like luckily I didn't catch COVID until much later, and it was fine for me. Like I'm really sorry to hear that you have long COVID, and I hope that you will like recover very. I'm sure you will like very soon. Um, but yeah, like it is really sad with all the people like catching COVID and then like passed away and all that. But like I I try to look at things like on the positive side, I suppose.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I just remember doing all the online teaching, like because I also do a fair bit of, like school teaching,
Hmm.
and then you turn the Zoom on, and the other side is your teenage student, and they're just tearing their hair out, aren't they? They just found it. I think I felt worst for young people during
Hmm.
that time because like some of them it was like their last year of school or first year of uni, like a really like important, like usually a very memorable period in your life, and then they were like, "This is it. You just stay at home and stare at screens."
Yeah.
I kept saying to my students, like, "Don't worry, this is not life. It won't happen again, hopefully, and that you will come out of this and you can live life again. Don't worry." Because I'm just like, they were just looking so depressed. They're just like trying to cheer them up.
I know.
I
Yeah,
was cheering them up. Yeah,
I
yeah.
do feel
But
really bad, like for those students, like especially like imagine if you start your first year and
oh, can't hear you.
you're in the first lockdown, and then like literally, I mean, like it kind of dragged on for quite a few years. Like now, can't believe it's like what 3 years ago. So like that could be it. That could be your entire uni life. Just
Yeah.
imagine that. Like that must be quite
Yeah,
not very
I just
pleasant.
can't imagine. It will take such resilience and like positive attitude, I
Hmm.
think. And
Yeah.
I like so much respect for people who've done that
Hmm.
in recent years. And I just hope that it hasn't left like a negative long-term impact. I hope it's going to be something that we can all kind of build up from.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I chose to ask you to join me on this chat because even before the pandemic hit and I started thinking more about my identity um, as a person and as a musician.
Hmm.
You were actually the first person that I ever like spoke about what it feels to be EC, so East or Southeast Asian in the UK, and very specifically being classical musicians. I don't even know when it was. It's like 2018 or something.
Something like that. I remember, like, that was a cross society gig we did. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I think we had like maybe 3 or 4 hours in between the rehearsals
We
and
had
the
hours.
concert.
Yeah.
And so we were
Yeah.
just like, oh, let's grab a coffee. And then, like, we ended up just sat in the coffee shop for like 4 hours or 3 hours and just chatting. And like, yeah, to be honest, like, you were also the first person that, like, I spoke to about these kind of experiences, really. And like, I just remember, like, at that moment, I was just like, oh my gosh, there's someone who understand me. Like,
I was like,
like,
oh, I'm not imagining it. Somebody
no,
else thought
yeah,
the
I'm just
same.
making this all up. And like, someone I finally can understand, like, my thoughts and like, my situation. And it was such like, yeah, it was an amazing point. And like, yeah, thank you so much
No,
for.
thank you. Yeah, because then after that, I think because we all, like you said, like before pandemic, we were all quite busy, weren't we? So
Mhm.
like I didn't really think about it. Like it was like you definitely planted a seed in the back of my mind, but
Yeah.
like I didn't then really think about it. And
Hmm.
then when pandemic hit, and then we were all at home, and then obviously because some people, prominent figures, started saying things like Kung flu and China virus and that kind of stuff. And then
Mm.
obviously hate crime against EC people in the Western countries kind of
Yeah.
became a real problem. And then I started thinking more about it and actually thinking back over my life, like because I started thinking about why do I play the oboe? Because obviously I wasn't playing performing anymore because nothing was happening.
Hmm.
Um, so it's just like, why do I play the oboe? And then started thinking about like where my career had got to up
Hmm.
until the pandemic hit, and then
Yeah.
just everything that happened before, and then everything that I hope to happen after, and then my kind of ethnicity became such a big thing, and then started thinking about if other people felt the same, and that's when I started digging, and then this project came about eventually.
Hmm.
Um, but what it's tricky because like I said this with in with Anna in our chat that's also on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it. That how Anna and I have known each other even longer than you and I because we were actually in the National Youth Orchestra when we were teenagers,
Mm.
and then we were at the academy basically at the same time, and then you came I think maybe a couple of years after
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
started. Um, but like we never hang out at academy. Like we've known about each other and we both play woodwind instruments, but we just didn't hang out. Like we didn't talk to each other. Like we sometimes sat together at lunch with other group, like a group of people.
Yeah.
Um, but my friends, or I love them all equally, were almost I'd specifically chosen white friends almost.
Hmm.
I think it came from the fact that classical music is a very white space. I mean, obviously, historically,
Hmm.
it's mainly white.
Yeah.
So I think I subconsciously kind of tried to assimilate whiteness, I think some people call it,
Hmm.
and then ended up with like almost subconsciously avoiding people like friends like Anna and you actually, because we were at the academy at the same time, but I don't think we actually hung out that much when we were at academy together.
No, yeah. I suppose like, we bumped into each other like, in like, performance classes and
Mm,
also like, wind rep sessions and
mm,
like, woodwind classes and orchestras and all that. But yeah, I suppose at that time, like, I was like, I had my group of friends and like I suppose yeah at that time I hung out with quite a lot of flautists and like for some reason, like yeah, like string players, I suppose, and pianists, and like you know, um, to me, I like there were some other like Taiwanese flautists at the academy at that time,
Mm.
and like yeah, of course, like I was like friendly to them, and like I suppose it's just all for me, like in my group of friends at that time, it was a very mixed group. Like there were Americans, Canadians, like French, like German people, and like Taiwanese people, Japanese people, like Korean people, and all that. Like it was a very mixed bunch at the academy, I suppose.
That is a good thing about music, though, isn't it? Because I went to, before academy, I was at Chet's, the Cheetham
Hmm.
School of Music in Manchester,
Yeah.
and I think it's like a best place for someone like me to go, obviously because, well, you go if you're musically gifted.
Hmm.
So actually, in the grand scheme of things, it is a very diverse school.
Hmm.
Um, so it felt like fine to be there. And then I got to academy, and I don't know, it just felt like a bigger version of that. I didn't really think anything of it, and I didn't actually hang out with anyone. I was quite antisocial at academy, actually.
Were you?
Yeah, well, because I don't know, I always had a part-time job,
True.
and then my now husband Adam, he was doing his undergrad at RCM,
Hmm.
Royal College of Music, so like sometimes I'll be hanging out with them. What a traitor.
I know.
Um, so yeah, I just think because I remember at academy also there was a group of lovely, lovely Japanese girls that did like up to high school in Japan and then came to academy for undergrad, or sometimes do a music degree in Japan and then come over for postgrad.
Hmm.
But I did hang out with some of them, and they're all lovely people, and I hope they're all doing well. I've not really kept in touch with them, but like I didn't feel like I had much in common with them
Hmm.
because I came to this country when I was 13,
Hmm.
so I was a bit more British than Japanese from
Yeah.
by the time I got to academy.
Yeah.
So I then didn't feel like I didn't, not that I didn't feel like I belonged there, but I just felt like, oh, I don't think we have much in common.
Hmm.
And then so yeah, so when we had that um accidental 4 hour chat.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, actually, we are in the same place. Like we actually have a lot more in common than
Yeah.
anybody else at the academy.
Yeah.
That's what I really felt like. And then we went to Singapore
Yes.
together, didn't we? Also with
That was
Anna,
that was really
and
fun too, and
considered
with Sam and everybody.
that was yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. And then I felt like because we were in Asia, I mean Singapore obviously is a real melting pot, but
Yeah.
it is in Asia. And then there were three of us like in the wind section, all like Asianing out, drinking bubble tea every day. That was a happy time.
I know that was such a fun trip. Like with Ashley, with Ben, and like ESEAs, and oh
Hi
god,
everyone. If you ever
hi,
watch, we love you.
somewhere out there. Yeah. Well, like going back to your points, I suppose like when you're making friends, like like you are just kind of trying to find people that you can relate to the most, and also like you can get on with really well, and like you have common interests, and like um basically just like you love hanging out with, like yeah. So I suppose because you've like you've studied in school in here, and so pretty much like you are basically British, and in the way that like maybe that sort of you didn't like I suppose you wouldn't be like, oh well, I just want to make like friends with Japanese people, or I just want to make friends with American people, or just want to make friends with Canadian people, or whatever. And so it just kind of naturally, form a group of friends, and then that's just how it sort of happened. And it's the same with me as well. Like, I never really thought about like, oh, I only want to make Taiwanese friends, or I only want to make like, friends with like, certain nationalities, and I just kind of talk to everyone and try to be nice to everyone, and like see who I get on with the most.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's basically what we do, isn't it? But I
yeah.
think I don't. You probably didn't feel that way, but thinking back, I feel like I was actually trying to hide my Japaneseness.
Hmm.
I think that's what um, became obvious to me once we were in the lockdown. I was thinking more about it,
Yeah.
and then I started reading books and essays written by people in, other ECs that maybe work in creative arts or do writing and things. And some of them say like they, without them realizing, they actually chose a career path that is like specifically not very Asian.
Hmm.
And I found that quite interesting because I actually feel the same. I was like, well, classical music is not very Asian. It's a very white
Hmm.
culture. But then you get that imposter syndrome
Hmm.
thing, and then I've come out the other way, other side, and now I'm like, well, music is music, and music is such like a fundamental way of self-expression.
Hmm.
Actually, it doesn't matter where you've come from or who you are or what you look like or whatever.
Hmm.
So that's the part of the reason I'm doing this project.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever had this? When people are sharing ideas and advising you about what the repertoire to perform,
Yeah.
I've had people advise me from like good place from the good place that I should consider performing works by Japanese composers.
Hmm.
Have you ever had something similar, or is it not really as much of a thing?
Well, I have I have people ask me before like, oh, do you play um uh compositions written by Taiwanese composers like very much or something. Um, but my like I think like for me, because I don't really do a lot of chamber music concerts or solo recitals. Like basically like almost 99.9% of my work at the moment is orchestral. So I don't really have any say on what repertoire I'll be playing. I'm sure that when you work in the orchestra, that's also like your situation as well. So I yeah, but like people definitely have asked me before. They were just like, oh, so you're you come from Taiwan originally. Like do you play music written by Taiwanese composers? And I'm like, well, yeah, I have before, but that's not all the music I play. You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I think it's also I don't know. I don't think the Japanese or Taiwanese composers wrote their music to be performed by specifically people
exactly,
of that nationality.
exactly,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, so like I always have a little. It doesn't annoy me, but it kind of think I would never say to an English friend, "Oh, why don't you just play Vaughan Williams?"
yeah,
Personally, or like maybe more relevantly, maybe someone is Welsh, and then you say, "Oh, you should just play Welsh music."
hmm,
I don't know. I mean, I know some people choose to. That's absolutely
yeah,
fine. Obviously,
yeah,
some composers need more highlighting because the other problem with classical music is that, like you say, when you play an orchestra, you don't get to choose what you play, but
yeah,
you sometimes get in this loop of always playing like Beethoven, Brahms, and something, I don't know, Tchaikovsky. They are all great, but
hmm,
there is a little bit of like certain composers get more um, highlighting than others. So in that sense, obviously, it's important to champion whatever music that you feel um, is really important to you,
yeah.
obviously. But I just never knew how to respond when people said that to me about Japanese composers, and I just thought, no, no, should I?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like I yeah, I think that when they ask you that question, y- like shouldn't feel like, oh, because I come from Taiwan, so I um should only play like Taiwanese composers' music. But I suppose like in the nowadays that there's quite a lot of um celebration going on about like our own identity and all that. And so actually I would love to, if I were to do a recital like in the future, I would love to play some Taiwanese composers like
Hmm.
pieces, and like and also to include like like all of the other like you know composers that's not being performed very often, and like yeah, I would love to celebrate all that. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think also it comes to a question of like authority. Like, so I think these people have somehow think that I have the authority to give authentic representation of the pieces written by Japanese composers.
Hmm.
Um, and then it can go the other way. Like, so I think we as Asians quite often face criticism that um, because of where we come from, what we look like, and our genetics,
Hmm.
that we don't actually understand Western classical music as deeply as like our European or um, white American counterparts.
Hmm.
Um, so it kind of goes both ways because there was a story that Classic FM shared when we were still in lockdown, I think, about doing a virtual masterclass at Juilliard.
Hmm.
That this very famous violin professor was teaching a Japanese American violinist, I think, and I think she was still a teenager at the time, and
Oh
just
yeah, I
mentioned
remember
about
that. Oh my gosh, that was
saying that
horrid.
Koreans can't sing, and she said, "Well, I'm Japanese, and also we do sing," but he just said, "Oh, you're all the same. None of you can sing." Has he heard of karaoke?
I
But anyway,
know.
and I think that some of it has. I don't know. I have obviously I can't say for sure that because no one's ever said it outright to my face, but I have had people kind of react to my performances that in a very strange way, like they'll be surprised that I can play something well that was written by a white composer.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I think it's a tricky um thing because we feel it. Like when we had that first 4 hour chat between the
Hmm.
gigs.
Yeah.
Like that's what because I thought I was imagining these things.
Hmm.
But then like I think we had lots of little stories like that we really related to with each
Yeah.
other. And I just think that it's important that people do share these thoughts,
Yeah.
regardless of who they are, like, because depending on your identity, you'll have different like there are lots of ways to be marginalized.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think it's really important that people talk about it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we're talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I totally agree because I think that, you know, I suppose you wouldn't really question, like, for instance, like, I don't know, let's say a Canadian musician saying that, well, what do you know about French music? You wouldn't like really question them about these kind of things, or you wouldn't say to like uh I don't know, like let's just take a random country. Um um yeah, Icelandic like musician, and you wouldn't say to them, what do you know about like Spanish music, you know? So so to me that's like I'm just trying to think, put it under that sort of context, and so to be questioning us to not knowing like how to interpret like Western classical music, that's equally exactly the same, like um yeah. So I think that I think for musicians probably of a certain age, that that's sort of maybe that's the environment that they were used to, and like they're kind of brought up in that kind of um environment, so their thoughts are kind of stuck in that kind of um in the past basically. I do think that the situation is getting much better, But
Yeah.
yeah, I do understand like what you're trying to say is that like, people would question your ability, my ability, or like, or the East Asian, Southeast Asian musician's ability, just because we look very different.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we quite often people have this idea that we are not very expressive, like
Hmm.
not just in music, but just as people in general.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, we were messaging each other on Monday morning, weren't we? Because of results of the Oscars, obviously,
Yeah.
was a big deal for us.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was just so great because I messaged you and said like, I'm crying watching all the acceptance speeches,
Yeah.
and then you watched it later, like I'm crying now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But I think because it was just so like refreshing and moving to see people like Michelle Yeoh and Ki Hui Kwan like
Hmm.
being really outwardly emotional
Hmm.
and being really articulate, and also to be recognized for the acting work that they've done.
Hmm.
I think it was quite something for us because that doesn't happen much. It would, people kind of think, oh, they're very polite, quiet people
Hmm.
that can like are good at things. We
Hmm.
always people think we're good at things, like we're tidy or we're organized or
Hmm.
we're good at maths or do you know what I mean? Like we're good at things, people think,
Yeah.
um, but not necessarily like that. Not very. Not they. I know people think we're human, but like not very. I don't know, expressive humans. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. We do need to break that down somewhat. I think
Yeah.
that's why I'm really loud.
Are you? No, I totally agree with you. I think this kind of comes down to like the culture and also upbringing. Because I
Yeah.
was thinking about this the other day, is that like, basically, like, I suppose like quite a lot of like traditional Asian values, um, like, what we were told when we were kids, that like, just put your head down, just work really, really hard, and then like, just listen, and then like don't talk back, and like, just be very quiet, and you know, um,
Don't make trouble.
yeah, don't make trouble. And like, there's the Japanese saying of like, the nail like, stuck out will get what? Hammered down, isn't it? Like, things like that. So like, there are values that's being treasured, or like, being viewed as positive, I suppose, like, in the East Asian or Southeast Asian part of the world, that actually, if you take that quality into like other parts of the world, that could be actually viewed as negative, I suppose,
Mm,
almost in the way that like, actually probably the American kids, or like the British kids, will they will probably be told to do the opposite, or
yeah.
like, oh, don't be too quiet, and like, just like, say your opinion, like, like voice your opinion,
Mm,
or like, if you disagree, just disagree, and
yeah.
like, tell your reason, and like, put on a good argument, stuff like
Mm,
that. And so I think because like we are kind of growing up in different like environments, so we are basically programmed differently. So when we are in certain situations, like, when we are put in certain situations, we will react to things around us differently. And I think because of that, that like, a lot of people would um, think Asian people is like, really quiet, not very confident, and like, maybe a bit unsure. But quite a lot of times it's like, because we are taught to be humble, we're taught to be like, put our head down, and like, not to be overly confident, and like, but ability wise, like, I like to put that as an example of like, for instance, if like, there are two musicians that, or anything, not only just musicians, they have equally the same ability, and one of them is like really introvert and like really humble, and then like always talk themselves down, and then the other one is like really appears to be really confident and then really outspoken. And so people would view these two people like with they wouldn't necessarily consider them as like equal ability. Like
Mm,
I'm sure that we already know that like who they will think that you know is has a probably stronger ability or better ability. And I think that for probably maybe us, that's how like it was come across, and like and maybe that's why people think that like we're not as confident, I guess.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
definitely been overlooked for opportunities. I can't say for sure because of me being Japanese, but like I can tell you that there have been instances where I know I was actively overlooked for opportunities, and
Hmm.
I can't any reasons why other than my ethnicity, but obviously I can't prove that, and I know people don't mean any harm ever.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but like I think it's important that I wish I was aware of it sooner so that I could do something about it myself, like you say, maybe speak up a bit more or
Hmm.
just make yourself known a little bit more. Like I wish I'd kind of done that, and then some things might. I mean, I'm very happy with where I am now, but
Hmm.
I feel like I might have opened up more doors for myself if I had been more outspoken or yeah, just a bit more noticeable.
Hmm.
But yeah, because talking of which, there's this term invisible minority,
Hmm.
and I think that's quite interesting because I've also been there's been few times where I'll be in a room with a few people in different places, different sets of people, and will the question of diversity or um, equality or whatever, or any racist contents within operas or that kind of stuff come up in a conversation.
Hmm.
Um, People talk as if assuming that I won't have an opinion about it. Like
Yeah.
if it had been like someone black, say, or even like South Asian to an extent in this country, I think people would be a bit more aware and go, oh, sorry, is this conversation uncomfortable? Like what do you think? I think people tend to do that or not talk about it at all, which
Mm.
I think is actually worse.
Yeah.
Um, but like if I'm in the room, they just talk. Obviously it's probably a good thing because they just don't think that um I'm an other to them. Maybe I don't know. Maybe
Hmm.
there is a good thing about that. But I also feel a bit like something jars in me that they obviously don't see me as somebody who might have experienced these things personally.
Hmm.
And I think that it goes into the whole like when we talk about diversity in classical music, I think we are somewhat forgotten about.
Yeah.
Don't know. You ever feel that?
Well, I definitely have similar experiences in that, but like it wasn't really about music. I think it was like I don't know, it was somewhere, and then like it was just like strangers that were just talking about um like racism and all that, and then I was just like standing there, and like these two people were like you said, I felt like very
Oh, Michael, sorry,
sorry.
just that sentence again because he went silent, and I don't know if it was just me or.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, so I definitely felt like, I was part of the conversation, but they were just kind of chatting to each other at that point. And then, and I definitely felt like, like you said, I'm like, well, am I invisible or something? Like, if you want to talk about racism and like, talk about like all these kind of things, like, well, hello, you know, at that time.
Yeah.
And like, so, um, yeah, it did like feel a bit like weird, and at that time I didn't, I'm kind of regretting it a little bit, but like I didn't really say anything at that point because I kind of, well, number one, like I was kind of in a hurry. I didn't want to get like stuck in that conversation, and also number two, I was just like, well, I'm not really in the mood of like, trying to open up like in a whole load of like new conversations with these two strangers. So I was just like, yeah, whatever. And
Yeah, yeah, you do need to be in the right frame of mind to like speak up. Like you can't exhaust yourself doing it. Like you can't have a burnout. Like I think sometimes it's okay to just look after yourself and just go, you know what, right now I'm not I've not got the energy to do it.
mhm.
I think that's absolutely fine. But I think I'm glad that I'm a bit more aware of it myself and I hopefully over time I'll become more confident to be a bit more outspoken about it.
Yeah,
But yeah, but this is my kind of beginning of that journey.
yeah, absolutely. I think it is really important to be talking about it more. And also I think it's important for us to to know that like, we are like worth it, I suppose. Like, just trust in our abilities and also like, um be confident and be happy of who we are and like, and hopefully um yeah, I mean like, like, and hopefully like people will realize like, our
We'll
worth
start the ripple
and
effect. Yeah,
yeah,
we'll start the ripple
exactly.
effect and
Because it's
eventually move to something bigger.
yeah, exactly. And the things that I think the most important thing is like, we want to be recognized like, by our abilities, not like, with anything else. And like for all those like, boys and girls like from around the world, like all they need to know is that as long as they work really very hard and then like, be very good at whatever they're doing and like, you know, hopefully their their abilities will be recognized and then they will
Yeah,
be
they
somehow
go
like
along
successful in a way and
yeah,
rather than like not being recognized because of oh because you're an Asian or musician or whatever
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I think we all kind of can start being a bit more aware that it does happen,
Hmm.
um, and that we, I do, yeah, like not shout about it, but I think maybe just be prepared to be a bit more proactive. I think that's how I
Yeah,
feel right now. I might think differently in about a year.
yeah, I know it's quite hard. I mean certainly there are loads of times in the past I felt like on the hindsight I'm like well yeah I should have spoken about it or I should have spoken up about like certain type of things but then like it's I am trying very hard to be to speak up a little bit more but also at the same time I'm like oh well like I don't want to I don't want to become like the angry Asian person
Yes.
and
Yeah.
yeah like I don't want to like annoy people and I don't want to it's hard to find the balance and also quite often I feel like it's hard to find the right words I suppose like
Yeah.
yeah and I kind of feel like I don't really I don't know have to like yeah I don't feel like I always have the right words to talk about these kind of things I don't know why
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. It's like a feeling, isn't it? And
yeah.
we don't quite know how to articulate yet. That's why I started reading quite a lot more books. I
Hmm.
used to only ever read like fictional books because
Hmm.
I have always been a bookworm. Um, but lockdown was the first time I actually started reading like essays and
Hmm.
actual kind of research stuff or that kind of stuff. And I have been posting about it on Insta. If anyone's interested, you can check out the stories on my Yard Ensemble page.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's really incredible. So there are some people out there who are just so articulate. I'm just like, oh, this is exactly how I feel, but you put it into actual words that make sense.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so I'm hoping to continue doing that and then talk to more people so that we all collectively, yeah, find the words. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've kept you long enough,
No, that's
Michael.
all right. Yeah. I feel like, we haven't even started the conversation. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, literally, I
We'll
feel
have
like
to do another
we
one.
haven't really talked about, like, like, yeah, I suppose, like, just to think back on our 4 hour chat, like we're like we haven't even covered like we haven't even
Yeah.
scratched the surface of that actually.
No, no, we haven't.
No.
Yeah, I'm hope that people will get in touch with us, you or me or Manyo Sambor or their friends,
Yeah.
and just actually start talking about it a bit more. I think
Yeah.
that would be the dream.
Yes.
So that, yeah, like I said, collectively we start with that kind of creating vocabulary
Hmm.
for us to talk about the shared experiences, things that we've all probably felt but not articulated.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know. I think definitely like talk more and like
yeah,
having conversations with like more people is really, really important.
yeah. Oh,
Oh, I want to like, yeah, hi Dan. You know what? Like, man, you should have a conversation with Dan next time.
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, Dan, if you're up for it, I'll be in touch. But anyway, yeah, Michael, I should let you go. You're having a very busy week. I'm not going to take up any more of your day off.
No, that's all right.
So you
Thank you
can
so
carry
much.
on.
And
But so nice to see you.
to chat more soon.
Yeah,
Yeah, next time.
we will. All right, love. Thank you so
That's
much.
okay.
Speak soon.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.